Hello and welcome to Transplant Garden. Today we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about how to get cuttings from your canna plant. Scletum tortuosum is one of my favorite plants and I'm happy to share some information with you today. This is my hydroponic setup, and if you have a plant that's in soil, you're going to follow about the same procedures that I do today, but I'd like to just kind of share so you can take one plant and make it into a ton of plants. When choosing where you want to take a cutting from, keep a few things in mind. First of all, if you see right here, the yellow bit in between the leaf and these two protrusions, that's a flower that's forming. Now, if we take a cutting from this part, the plant might be putting too much energy into creating the flower to put out roots if we cut it. Now, when I'm choosing a cutting, I want to have at least two nodes. So this is a node and this is a node. This is a cutting I took last night. It has two nodes, but it might be just a little bit too small to get a good cutting out of. I'm going to try it anyways and see how it goes, but I would go for something a little bit larger and more developed than this cutting here. So this is a good candidate for cutting here because it has a long stem, you can kind of see. And then it has a set of leaves, so that's one node. And then it has another node, and it shows some pretty good development. I like the long stem because I can cut way down at the base and then put in the rooting hormone and put that part in the soil, so then it's got plenty of places to make roots from. Now that I've chosen what cutting I'm going to take, I want to sanitize my cutting instrument. I do that because I want my plant to suffer as few consequences from the cutting as possible. Sanitizing your cutting instrument makes sure that you don't run into any cross-contamination issues. So if you had a plant that had some sort of disease or something like that, you wouldn't transfer it to the plants that you're cutting and then have your whole crop die or become weakened. Alright, so to do that, I'm going to take this isopropyl alcohol, wet a paper towel, and just rub down the blades of my cutting instrument, making sure to get good coverage on that cutting instrument. I'm using this. I've used a scalpel in the past, but that was a little bit rougher, so I just stick with a pair of garden pruners. So now that it's covered with isopropyl alcohol, I'm just going to let it air dry. I don't want the isopropyl alcohol to be really touching my plant stems and potentially causing any damage. So just kind of wave it around the air a little bit, make sure that it's clean and dry from the isopropyl alcohol. All right, so now we go to cutting. Now I want to leave a little bit of stem. So I cut, I get a decent sized cutting. Now this has plenty of leaves, so hopefully it'll be able to set out roots pretty easily. It's got the two nodes, and it even has a few points where it's going to start growing once it starts to get roots. And then right after I cut it, I just dip it in this rooting hormone and make sure the bottom is covered with that rooting hormone, and then we let it sit overnight at least. You can still let it sit for a day or two to let this end callus over. That'll help the rooting process. And this is what I use for my rooting hormone. This is my bed where I put my canna rootings in. The soil is succulent soil mixed with some perlite, those little white spots in there, as well as like a handful of sand or two. That kind of helps the canna have its natural environment and helps it to root a little bit easier. Canna likes a fast draining soil, which both the perlite and the sand help with. So what I'm going to do is in this cell, make a little indentation, and then take the canna cutting that we were just using, put that in there, tamp down the soil, and then we're going to give it just a little bit of water. I mentioned earlier that you don't want to have a flower present in your cuttings, but as you can see from this one, sometimes a plant is strong enough to both flower and root. This was planted about a week ago, and it had a little tiny flower bud in it that I missed, but it's already started to flower and root at the same time. So how I test to make sure that my plants are rooted, and you want to wait at least a week or two after you do your cuttings, is I firmly grasp it, make sure not to just grab one leaf, and I pull on it a little bit. You want to grab about the base, and you want to grab a strong part of the plant so you don't rip off a leaf, but you're testing for any sort of resistance. If there's any resistance, it started to put out roots, and then that's how you know your canna plant is rooting. But if you try that too early, you're just going to pull it out, and that'll hurt its chances of rooting later. So that's how I check to make sure my plants are rooting. Now that I put my cutting into soil, I put my humidity chamber on top. Now this helps the plant get a little bit of moisture so that it doesn't dry out and has time to put out roots before it dries out and dies. So these little vents here, I close them when I first put cuttings in. So they're both closed. And then now these integrated lights help to boost the humidity and give the plant enough sunlight and warm them a little bit for their first stages of growth. You want to make sure that your cuttings are in a well-lit area and also not too cold, because that'll help them put out roots and grow into a strong plant. This is a VivaSun humidity chamber. I've really liked it so far. It has this top, integrated lights and vents, and then also you can pull out the cells if you need to work on them or drain the humidity that's come into the bottom of this tray here. This is the way that I root my cuttings. If another way works out well for you, try that out, but this is just a little bit of a guide to help you make your decisions on how you want to root your own cuttings. This is Transplant Garden. Thanks for watching this video, and we'll see you in the next one.